The truth is, gender-based violence is showing up in every system in our region. The workplace, in our education system, in healthcare system, and we're seeing it continue to grow and to escalate. And that's why we need you to come together to really help us figure out what the solutions can be if we lean in and we collaborate more. The data is clear. Gender-based violence is skyrocketing, and the prevalence is providing us with a pivotal opportunity to acknowledge in this moment, beyond an awareness month, and to ask ourselves, how will our region rise up beyond violence? How will we each use our influence, our positional power, our creativity to disrupt barriers for access for survivors and to drive equitable change? Our region can course correct. We are not powerless in addressing gender-based violence if we make it a priority in each of our sectors, if we lean in and if we reimagine and how we can create solutions. So I wanted to keep that short. And before we start, I do want to present an award. We've identified 2 change agents for this year who we feel exemplify really trying to change systems, lean in, collaborate, and innovate. I am pleased to pronounce with the 2021 Change Agent Award, Heile, as well as Lindsay Sheehan, who together are working tirelessly to bring perpetrators of sexual violence and intimate partner violence to justice in Butler County. Both co-lead the sexual response team in Butler County, which is the only team like this that we're seeing in our Southwest region. And they work weekly as prosecutors to really focus on child sexual abuse, as well as working with the adult sexual assault task force, connecting with law enforcement to ensure they have everything they need with evidence so they can bring cases to the grand jury. I would like to invite Kelly and Lindsay to come off mute and share a few words about why they show up every day to support survivors.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for this award. It really means a lot to us. I think I speak for both Lindsay and I. We're very humbled as well. We know all of you are out there working in this field. I started in the Child Assault Division about 8 years ago, and at that point in time, we had a very established child assault task force, and that focused specifically on child physical abuse and child sexual abuse. And as I came into that position, it just started to expand. I saw more and more of a need in our office where sexual assaults were not getting the look that they needed. Unfortunately, very often the first time a prosecutor even had any contact with a case was after it had already been through a preliminary hearing. The defense attorney already had had an opportunity to cross-examine the victim, and the system was already failing our victims. So at that point in time, I had approached Mike Moser, who was our county prosecutor, and asked him if we could work to expand our division to include adult sexual assaults, and that's where we started with that. And that has made a huge change. We've seen that throughout the county. And the biggest thing is we became a contact for law enforcement from the moment they get a call on a sexual assault, that they know they can reach out to myself or Lindsay and get advice on the case. What else do they need? What else should they do? And that has made a big difference. We were also able to bypass the preliminary hearing system and take these cases direct to grand jury. That avoided an opportunity for that victim to be cross-examined by the defendant. It gave them a little more sense of security that the first time they had to talk about this, they were actually working with the prosecutor that they were going to be with throughout the process. So that made a big difference. We also, with that, wanted to make a big change in just the way sexual assaults are viewed and are investigated, because we weren't seeing any problem with our investigators looking at child sexual abuse cases and immediately believing the victim and going from there. But we were seeing that with adult sexual assaults. So really wanted to change that thought process and the way they approach the investigations. And, though it's always, a working project, we feel like we've had a lot of success in that and have had a lot of success with prosecutions. I had come from, luckily, internships in prosecutors' offices, including Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, where they did have a specialized division. So that was something that I felt like I could follow through on and had some contacts because of that. So that was very helpful. The one thing I can say is that this is a team effort. Women Helping Women has been amazing, and they've been so supportive throughout this entire process. We've now been able to develop a sexual assault response team for Butler County, as well as a sexual assault task force, so that our law enforcement can come to us on a weekly basis with new cases that are coming in. But it's also, I think, working with a partner, having Lindsay there with me. She wasn't always a part of that division, and we have expanded that division. There's now a total of 3 prosecutors, and that's really huge, because when you're dealing with stuff like this, not only do you need somebody to collaborate with and somebody to get another view of a case with, but you need somebody to just kind of vent to and to be able to talk to, because some of the stuff you deal with is very heavy. So we recently, within the past year, actually expanded just our child assault and sexual assault to also include the intimate partner violence. We found that it was just a natural, seamless movement into that, because it's all interconnected. And we saw so many cases that crossed over that it just felt natural to also include those. So I'll let Lindsay say a few words.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Sheehan. Thank you again for that award. This has been, again, like Kelly said, we're so humbled and honored. And just to kind of quickly piggyback off of what Kelly said, at this point, one of our big steps in bringing change to the community is really trying to educate our law enforcement. And the way that we're doing that is, even last week, we held a training in order to show law enforcement, because they're the first contact that victims have for the most part. And so, other than maybe hospital staff or Women Helping Women, and rethinking how they do their interviews, not interrogating, stop asking the why did you do this and why didn't you do this, recognizing that there is some trauma going on and how that they can work through that trauma, how they can utilize empathy in their questioning to overcome these rape myths, to overcome, what we see in domestic violence, and even with sexual assault, with not wanting to pursue it and allowing that perpetrator to get away, because they feel like they've been at every step of the, everywhere that they turn, that there's an obstacle in their way. So empowering survivors, and we've even noticed just in when we took over the sexual assault violence, an uptick in the number of Latino and Latina community that has come forward. And so we have really noticed that change and hope to continue that good work. So thank you to everyone at Women Helping Women for recognizing what we're doing here. And we're just getting started.
We're so grateful to honor you both. I'm sorry that we couldn't show everyone your awards. We did get with you yesterday to present those. And thank you for also noticing the influx you're seeing with the Latina population. That's why Women Helping Women is hiring a second Latinx advocate who will be focused and based out in Butler County to meet those unmet needs and growing needs. Thank you both so much. It is now my pleasure and honor to pass the mic to, one of the people who I feel is one of the most talented leaders in this region. She's an incredible friend. She's an incredible colleague. She's a visionary, an incredible communicator, and the only person I could think of to moderate our incredible rock star panel. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Regina Carswell Russo, who is the President and Chief Strategy Officer of Right Now Communications, who will lead us through our nuanced conversation. Regina?
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for inviting me to join in this conversation. And I see the participants. We have more than 120 participants. You got up this morning, you turned on the Zoom, you put a little lipstick on, you put some under eye concealer on to listen, hear, and get informed about this conversation from the titans that we're about to hear from in a moment. So I'm going to tell everyone who's on this webinar and on this fundraising breakfast right now, take out a pen and paper. Right now, take it out, because we're going to have some gems that will be dropping, and you're going to need to write it down, and there's going to be some action items. And here we go. First, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel. We have with us this morning is the Interim Superintendent of Cincinnati Public Schools, Tianay Amat, Hamilton County Commissioner Denise Driehaus, President and CEO of Ohio National Financial Services, Barbara Turner, and the Chief Executive Officer of United Way of Greater Cincinnati, Moira Weir. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a lot to get to, so I want to make sure that all of our voices are heard. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Some of the questions I'll ask more than one of you to respond. Some I'll just ask one person. This is fluid, and above all, this is real talk. Okay, so let's get started. First, Miss Barbara Turner and Moira Weir. Just want to ask you first, why did the two of you decide? You could have done anything this morning. Why did you decide to be a part of this discussion? First, Barbara Turner.
Thank you, Regina, and thank you everyone who's here to engage in this very important topic. For me personally, first of all, there's a need to raise awareness. There's a need to increase prevention. There's a need to educate everyone about this horrific situation that women face. 1 in 3 women will experience some form of violence, gender-based violence, and it's not okay, and it's not a situation that is often talked about. It's treated as a secret, if you will, and victims are made to feel ashamed for being victimized and for being abused and challenged. And so for me, it's to really raise awareness, increase prevention, make sure that individuals understand that there is no true profile of individuals who are experiencing this type of abuse, and that it's starting earlier and earlier. You have teenagers who are now experiencing gender-based abuse. I was working with a young lady, mentoring her, and I noticed that she was on her phone a lot while we were talking, and I said, you know, that's really kind of rude. I'm spending time to listen to you and help you map out your college plans, and you're looking at your phone the entire time. And her response was, well, my boyfriend gets upset if I don't respond to his messages right away. And so you have to probe a bit and say, well, what does his being upset look like? And how do you respond to that? How does he respond? And so there's a lot of education that is required. There is a lot of pain that is being experienced. There's a lot of death that is occurring because of these situations, and we all need to be a part of the solution, because we all know someone, whether we realize it or not. We all know someone who has or is currently experiencing some form of gender-based violence, and so that's why I'm here.
Ms. Turner, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Ms. Moira Weir, President of and CEO of the United Way of Greater Cincinnati. By the way, must have to tell you this. Did you guys know that Moira Weir, first woman to lead the United Way of Greater Cincinnati, more than 100-year history? She doesn't like to tell people that, but it's important because when a woman takes the reins of an organization, there is a different lens. There's a different level of compassion, and there's a different level of execution to solving problems. Moira, you could have done anything this morning. Why are you here participating in this conversation?
Well, first of all, when I saw who else was going to be in the panel, I'm like, good gracious, what a bunch of rock stars. I feel like I was honored to even be included. But, well, this is a really, really important issue. I mean, Barbara did a wonderful job articulating it. And I will just say, working in my position prior to coming to the United Way, you know, every day we saw violence occurring in homes that when we were trying to engage families, whether it was through the child welfare system or the public assistance system. And as Barbara mentioned, you think about the trauma, first of all, but just the shame that so many times is associated. And I would say, from being a child welfare worker, I learned early on in my career what a tragedy it was when we saw children, we were faced with this decision about what's best for children in terms of child protection and parents, and how do you support families and particularly, mothers or fathers in terms of wanting to keep their family together, but people feeling like, well, is it safe for children, and how do you make sure children are protected, but also provide supports? So for me, it's been a huge evolution. I think early on, we didn't always have I think sometimes we found ourselves at odds, but I think over the years, we really became to collaborate and say, how do we, as Kristen was saying, really change the systems to really support families and help families be safe together. And that was just an evolution for me, and something I became really passionate about and continue to be really passionate about. And when we think about our work, and I love this, disrupting the system and deconstructing systems so that everybody in our region can thrive, and that families and children can thrive and be healthy. And that's why I love where I am now, is like, how do we really have those challenging conversations and raise the issues and educate each other? So thank you.
That's perfect. Now we have, I think, about not very long for this conversation. We have a lot to get to. So I want to make sure I just want everyone to establish the why before I get down to the nitty gritty and the questions. Hamilton County Commissioner Denise Driehaus, surprised to see you here in this position, only because when we think about dealing with these types of issues, we do not think about our policymakers, our legislative leaders who have a host of issues to deal with, zeroing in on this particular problem. Why is this so important to you to join this conversation this morning?
Well, good morning. Thank you. I too am joining because of the Rockstar panelists and guests and organization for that matter. So no, this is a huge issue for our community. And so hence it's a huge issue for the County Commission. And the real nexus for me is that I lead the Commission on Women and Girls. And one of our recommendations a couple of years ago, and some of my former members are on here, and so is Megan Cummings. Hello, Megan, who's a big supporter. So one of the recommendations was to expand the Divert program run by Women Helping Women, expand it outside the city and into the county. And so we have done that. We have funded it as a pilot program. The unfortunate piece is that during COVID, we saw so many women and families impacted by gender-based violence. And so our pilot is going to quickly expand to every jurisdiction that will partner with us to get Divert as a first responder into that community to help those women and families become stable and secure after an incident. And so there's for me, it's an obvious nexus that we as government step in and help those that are in vulnerable situations, challenging situations, really dangerous situations, and step in with our resources to make sure that people remain safe in the county.
And so I want everyone on this fundraiser to know this. Everyone has a touch point, an entryway to lean in and make a difference in this cause and this problem. This cause is big enough to rise to the level where the titans of our community are joining in this conversation today. And that means that people who are listening or watching can also participate and lean in and join them in this movement. Let me bring on Interim Superintendent for Cincinnati Public Schools, Tianay Amat. Welcome. Tell me, boy, you got a lot on your plate today. So tell me, leading the third largest urban school district in the state, tell me from that point of view and your lens as a lifelong educator, why you're joining this conversation and lending your voice this morning.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the panel today. Women Helping Women's partnership with CPS schools and the impact you have on our students cannot be overstated. Women must support women. I have benefited from these conversations my whole life, starting with my grandmother, who supported me as a child who's seen violence every day in the home. So I'm excited to give back. I also believe that it's my job as an educator to shape the future of students that goes beyond the academics. Prevention and education about gender-based violence is so critical. According to the CDC, nearly 1 in 11 female high school students reported having experienced physical dating violence in the last year. Interventions with young people to foster gender equality, gender equitable attitudes are vital for effective prevention. So by taking an active stance and acknowledging the issues beforehand, we as educators and role models can prevent teen violence before it even gets started. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm so excited to be around such strong women who are coming together to share ideas and to co-create something that will have an impact on our young people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here again. So I'm going to ask a question to a panelist, and I'm going to invite any other person on the panel, if you feel like you need to jump in, if that just hit you a little bit of a way and you're like, oh, let me answer that, Regina, jump in. Okay. Now, for timing's sake, remember that we want to open this up to questions from the people who are joining us for the fundraiser this morning. So we want to keep our answers as concise as possible. Ms. Barbara Turner, let's start with you. For many survivors, work may be the only touch point with the community beyond the walls of their home. And we know that at least 60% of gender-based violence survivors lose their jobs as consequence of the violence that they're experiencing outside the work, which affects their ability to show up, do the job, and be the best that they can be. So why should corporations and community service partners, like with United Way, like with Women Helping Women, why is it so important for employees to lean in together with them to help extend community-wide safety nets? Ms. Turner.
Yeah, so it's not just employees, but I think employers, but I think systems in general. It's important that we all partner together to protect and to provide resources and to educate our leaders within an organization on what abuse may look like. And then also understand that, as I mentioned before, there is no typical profile. You know, people think domestic violence or gender-based violence, and they immediately think of someone with a black eye or someone who can barely walk or what have you. And it takes all forms. It really does. And so making sure that you provide resources to help individuals who are facing these situations, but also that you train your leadership to have empathy and to recognize symptoms. I know I've been around domestic violence, as Tianay said earlier, my entire life. And I don't think that most people realized it because they had a certain opinion of what gender-based violence looked like. Right. And they just were not educated. And so for me personally, it's leaning in and caring enough to ask the difficult questions. It's leaning in and providing programs that educate on identifying the symptoms. It's asking the question when you know someone is frequently out, is there something going on at home? It's promoting your employee assistant programs. And so it starts with being intentional, I guess is what I would say, and sure, recognizing that it's not education based. It's not socioeconomic, it's right, not gender. Well, it is gender that we're talking about, but it's not race. Yes. It's not ethnicity. And so we need to really eliminate those stereotypes and make sure that we lean in enough to learn what it looks like and how we should respond and have empathy when we are responding.
And part of that is for employers, organizations, and systems to become informed and educated about the signs, about language for empathy and asking the right questions. And you do that by leaning into the organizations that are the experts in this area, like Women Helping Women. And
absolutely.
That brings me to United Way, because you have a host of organizations that help and support the community. It's a mission of the United Way way, this is from Moira Weir, to live united, to harness the resources and the people from across the region to solve some of the most complicated problems of this region. So why is it important, Moira Weir, for organizations and community-based organizations to lean in the other way to these systems, corporations, and companies to educate and inform to solve these problems?
Well, I think Barbara did a wonderful job explaining that. I also just think about how we continue to inform not only employers, but colleagues and coworkers and even family members, because, you all know this, but often it's hard to really get to the real tough questions, and it's hard to even detect what's happening. We know that we do a good job of hiding things with families and systems and secrets. So I think it's really important that we collectively come together and build on each other's learnings and each other's experiences and education. And how do we, coalesce around a community-wide, how do we change the trajectory of what's happening in our community collectively? One of us can't do it by ourselves. We have to all lean into this and build upon each other's expertise. And I said this at Job and Family Services, when you think about the work in our community, there's really no competition. There's opportunities for us all to work together and collaborate. And then how do we build off of what we can learn? And I do think it's really important, not only for the social service and the human services sector, but Commissioner Driehaus is on here. How do we do advocacy work and policy work and educate those that are making decisions? But also, to Barbara's point, employers, how do we make sure employers are well armed to be able to manage and handle and provide support? And we don't want people to lose their jobs because of something that's happened at home. So that's why it's
and I want to get to leaning in with the companies a little bit later about how this helps with retention and attracting workers, knowing that they're going to be supported on all sides when they're coming into a different work culture. But first, I want to talk to Interim Superintendent Tianay Amat. In your different roles in the different seasons of your career in education, you've seen a lot. And you know how this issue impacts families across the board. Is there any moment in your career where you were able to suggest, implement, move the needle, execute a plan, process, system that addressed this issue of gender-based violence when it came to our families and young kids?
Absolutely. CPS must meet the needs of our students. This includes creating awareness of and destigmatizing discussing gender-based violence, just opening up the conversation. So we have made it one of our priorities to create safe spaces for student voice. We create an environment where students can trust teachers and adults in their schools have these difficult conversations. We also have important peer organizations such as Girls to Women, which provide girls with leadership support and opportunities. And earlier this month, it was the International Day of the Girl, where at this event, it was aimed at young women becoming strong, respected, compassionate leaders that were change agents now. We had guest speakers who highlighted the importance of self-care and recovery. The speakers showed female students insight on the complexity of dating and recognizing the red flags in relationships. At the end of the event, these young women were able to ask questions and spoke about things that they've learned. And what we heard that they recognized that was huge, that dating violence is not normal. Does not need to be tolerated. This is the kind of approach, it's just a starting point for how we teach students the signs of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and stalking. But our partnership with Women Helping Women is another way in which we actively increase awareness about gender-based violence. Thanks to their Prevent and Empower program, CPS students demonstrated a 58% increase in skills for identifying signs of a healthy relationship. We continue to expand spaces for students to share their stories, to learn, and just be aware.
So this is good to know. And anyone who is on this fundraising breakfast this morning who have children in a school system, this is where you can lean in, right? Interim Superintendent Amat, you can contact your principal. You can contact the district. You can say, this is what I want and need in my school system because this is important to me, our family. And then it's a ripple effect because it impacts the community wide. So write that down. Commissioner Driehaus, I want to ask you this question because I want to know, in your career, what have you seen that has worked? And have you ever tried to implement policy or, again, like when I was talking to Tianay Amat, execute a policy, break down a system to success, or even a time that maybe you were met with a little bit of a barrier when you introduced this idea of addressing gender-based violence?
So thank you for the question. So I want to say very quickly that under Moira Weir's leadership, when she was at JFS, we did a lot for kids that are in danger. They can't remain safely at home. And so instead of saying, okay, that child immediately is, going into the foster care system, JFS says, what is the situation at home that makes that a dangerous situation? Is it a relationship in the home that's dangerous and unsafe? Is it they can't pay the utility bills? Is it, what is it? And how do we prevent that child being removed to begin with? If it's as simple as that, in many cases not. And then if that's not possible, we have kinship care where relatives can take care of their grandchildren in many cases. And we provide a stipend in Hamilton County. We were the first to do that in the state of Ohio, to allow those grandparents so they can afford to take those kids in and keep them out of the system, right? Because that's really what's best for kids. So it was under Moira's leadership. I mean, we were all happy to pile on because it was such a great, smart idea. And the other piece of that is if we've got a child that is in, kinship care, or maybe even has gone on to be in foster care, then we have a system set up for parents so that there can be quick reunification if that's possible and if the kid can stay safely at home. And so we've got parent navigators. It's really hard to navigate the system, once you've entered it. And so we've got navigators that help individuals get those kids back and create a safe environment so the kids can live safely at home. So Hamilton County is way ahead of other places. And Moira, huge shout out to you, because it does take a vision of how to approach a system differently to allow for that kind of opportunity to be created. And P.S., one little shameless plug, if you don't mind, Regina, there's a children's services levy on the ballot this year. We're 5 days away. It will not raise your taxes, but it will save lives and protect kids. So I will encourage all of you to vote yes for children's services.
No, thank you for saying that, because we need to know all of the pathways, all of the platforms, all of the tools, everything that is in our disposal that we can use to address this issue, to support our children, to support our families, and to support what that happens. It's a ripple effect, right? When we support our families in business, when we support our children and families in education, when we are those wraparound services and have those safety nets in the community with our social service agencies, it is a ripple effect in the community. It helps you keep us safe holistically in the entire county, Commissioner Driehaus. Everyone has a role to play. Every single person has a role to play on this fundraising breakfast. If you're listening to these titans in the community who are championing this cause, find your role, find your lane, and then reach out to them, and then reach out to women helping women to find out what you can do to lean in and do your part. Let's talk about systems, since you brought it up, and anyone can answer this question. Was there ever a time where there was an obvious system, a barrier to you personally trying to address this issue of gender-based violence? Were you able to move the needle? Were you able to find success? Or did you have to retreat a little bit and try to find other people, organizations like Women Helping Women to come in and give you some support so that you could remove that system and barrier? And it could be anything. So I'm going to start with you, Commissioner Driehaus.
Yes. When I was a state representative, I co-authored a bill to provide for reasonable accommodations for victims of domestic violence. Well, now that sounds very easy, doesn't it, ladies? One would think we could get that passed. However, we ran into all kinds of obstacles, both related to employment and housing. And so we had to work with the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, employers who were and not, and this goes to the awareness issue. And this has been a few years ago, but there was not an awareness of how women were being victimized and then re-victimized in their place of employment when accommodations weren't made, for them to go to court, for them to go to the doctor, for them to make sure their kids are safe. And so it was a challenge. I mean, it took 4 years, and by the way, we didn't get it passed. So talk about barriers, and I consider that a bit of a defeat. And I don't like to talk about my defeats, but this was one of them. But the employers, we finally got them to understand. And I was a small business owner, so I could speak to this in a way that I think was helpful. So we finally got the employers to kind of go with us. It was the housing piece that got us in trouble. And we had landlords, small landlords, that were very reticent about moving a woman and her kids out of a unit where the perpetrator lived with them, changing locks on the door so that the perpetrator could not re-enter that space. And it got really weirdly challenging because, again, you think that and we even said finally in the legislation that the victim would pay for the lock. Right? Just please let us do this. And we had a lot of resistance in the legislature. I will note that the legislature is primarily populated by men. So it obviously makes a difference when, you've got women sitting there going, oh, we get this, and men saying, we have no idea what we're talking about. And so it's an education process. We have done a lot of education since, but I was personally defeated, and we just didn't get it done. So now it's a matter of removing the stigma and misunderstandings about this so that we can start to move simple legislation to create safe spaces for women and kids.
I'm gonna go back again, because this is what I do with language, right? When we talk about something and we say it in a way that is not edifying, I'm gonna give you another lens to look through when you say that it was a defeat. I'm going to say that it was a victory, and this is why. You raised the issue, and by raising the issue, you uncovered the systems, those really gnarly systems that prevent us from moving the needle and really addressing this complicated problem. If you did not raise the issue, we would not be able to see these systems that people go through every single day. We know in social services, the reason why people are caught in poverty, it's not because of one issue. There are a complicated web of systems that keep them in generational poverty, that keep people in generational violence. And because you raised that issue, you were able to go back again with a different strategy and plan. And because you championed that, and you are an example of that, and so courageously shared that story this morning, I want to encourage everyone in this webinar to know that when you make a move to lean in to address this issue, whatever move you make is a victory. But you have to keep moving forward, just like Commissioner Driehaus. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. Barbara Turner, was there a moment when you were addressing policy and you were noticing or became aware of a system or barrier that prevented you or slowed down an ability to change policy in work that dealt with the issue of gender-based violence?
I would say there have been several situations over the years, but one thing that I've always tried to do is be very transparent and vulnerable about my own situation as a survivor of gender-based violence. And that tends to have a result in people leaning in. And so for me personally, it starts at home, raising boys who know how to treat women, raising a daughter who understands how she should be treated, and then working with different systems, be it at work, to make sure that there is a safe haven for those individuals who are experiencing some level of abuse. I think in the workplace, it's very difficult to shape policy around an issue like this. Employers are hands off often other than having referral programs or what have you. And so what I've personally done is on my own built systems to provide support and services and referrals to individuals. I've worked with young men because it's so important that we not forget that these young men have to be taught how to deal with stress, how to engage with women, how to treat young girls, and also that if they've experienced it in their household, the example isn't an example to repeat.
Yes.
And so I've formed processes and systems and places outside of the workplace for individuals who either have been exposed to or are at risk of either becoming victims or perpetrators. And the same with young women, you know. And so for me, it's, you can't always build a program within the system that you're in, be it your employer or what have you, but you can use your knowledge and resources and experiences to reach as many people as possible outside of the place of employment to impact positive change. And that's what I really have focused on: young women, young men, and using my resources and my experience to help them break the cycle. I think it's also, we would be remiss if we do not acknowledge the many men who are on this call who are also advocates. We need to all work together. It's not just, women do not own this issue.
That's right.
We all own this issue.
Yes.
And so I was able, when I went through things in my life, to turn to not only women, but to men as advocates to help me navigate the systems. And so I would say, if you can't do it in your place of employment because of whatever reason, because of the way things are structured, do not let that stop you. There's always a way to impact change.
So for two things. One, thank you for bringing that up, that the men that are on this call, that they're part of this conversation and part of the solution and part of leaning in. And I'd like to add that men are also are struggling with gender-based violence as well, right? So this conversation is for them as well. This rallying cry, this movement that we are all on this call about today, it is to help and protect them as well. And so, you know, your company and every place that you work, and everyone on here on this panel, everyone that works with you and for you and around you, they benefit from your lens and your experience and your compassion. But Ms. Turner, for those who do not have that same experience or lens, you know, one pathway to get support is to lean into organizations like Women Helping Women. What would be a strategy that you would give to people who are on this call today on how they can learn to be an ally and an advocate like you are?
Well, so I would say a couple of things. Education, make sure that you are aware of what's going on. Understanding what resources are available, like Women Helping Women, employee acceptance program. I mean, there are all kinds of resources that organizations have access to, either through their healthcare programs or what have you, that they should leverage. We have nurses on site at our organization. And so nurses are trained to look out for signs and symptoms. And we have leaders who find themselves operating in some ways as social workers. And so they should be aware of the resources. And so for me, it's education and being very transparent and vocal about the fact that this is an issue. All members of leadership should be aware of the issue, and all associates should be aware of the resources that are available to them, and that there should be no shame in asking for help.
That's right. That's right.
That's the
right.
thing. We have to stop shaming people or judging individuals or questioning why are they still in that situation or why are they letting this happen.
Yes.
They are victims. We cannot victimize them more by questioning their decision making. We need to help them navigate the situation and help them really see their strength and power, and really help them to see that they are worthy of love and a good life and protection. And so I think far too often we spend time trying to figure out the why.
Yes.
Instead of the why not. You
Yes.
know, it should be
Yes.
why not.
Yes.
It should be the exception, not the rule.
I hope everyone was writing that down, because if that was not a motivation to lean into this and some wonderful strategies and tools, I don't know what is. Everyone on this call has said so much to literally empower everyone else on this fundraising call. And I hope that you are embracing it and going back to it later on today and finding your lane in your platform in the way that you were able to lean into this. Okay, so I need to ask Moira Weir, then I need to ask Tianay about another question. So Moira, you started in the crisis, you started in the pandemic, and thank goodness you took the helm at that point because of your years of experience with the Jobs and Family Services. What did you learn though through that about the complexities of systems and barriers that overlap that prevent people from getting out of complicated and dangerous situations like this? And what is that just one actionable item or step that someone can take to change their situation? And I will tell you, because Commissioner Driehaus knows it well. You understood very well the complexities of the systems that can prevent you from moving the needle on this issue. So Ms. Moira Weir, tell us one actionable step that we can take to change this issue.
Well, I mean, that's
one, just one.
I mean, what I hope is that, you know, as we continue to have these conversations and really lean into educating, but really talking about what we're talking about at United Way a lot is like, how do we think about system change? So what we see above we use the metaphor about an iceberg, what we see the tip of the iceberg, but what's really causing it. And you know, instead of saying, I love what Barbara said, but also oftentimes when we talk about children, we say things like, what happened to them? Instead of like, you know, or why are they behaving that way? And it's more like, what has their journey been, and how do we support them in that journey? In the same way we want to support parents in that journey and provide them opportunities. And so for us, it's been very intentionally about going to community and going to those that they trust most in community and learning from that, because those closest to the situation or those closest to helping can inform us better about program design, advocacy, policy change, and then who should we be bringing to the table? And that's not always the well-branded organizations, and it's sometimes the non so well-branded, but how do we collectively come together and lean in and think about really supporting families in a different way so that they can thrive and have the supports they need as they determine that. And so I believe really strongly about every individual family should have agency over that choice and that pathway, and then we should support them in that. And that's hopefully what we can do when we continue to have conversations like this and really talk about system change so that everybody in our region benefits. Everybody has access to the things that they deem important for their family, particularly for their family in terms of how they like to nurture them and go forward.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask this question to Interim Superintendent Tianay Amat, and then I'm going to open it up to questions because I know people have lots of questions. But what is an actionable step that we can take? And I'm really curious about this because we're talking about changing generational cycles. We're talking about young people and kids that can turn the ship around when it comes to gender-based violence in school systems.
Yeah, and during these times, we're still facing the impact of COVID-19 and the effects that it had on our students. We know that mostly our Black and Brown students were disproportionately impacted. So coming to the table with some cultural awareness and being a part of the community and not seeing the community as a deficit, but an asset. So in order to turn this ship around, we have to co-create. We have to listen to our students, our employees, our parents, our partners. We can do this together. As a community, we must first heal and create joy. Create joy. We know that we have a gap in learning, and we're really doing everything that we can to accelerate learning. But without healing and joy of our teachers, they cannot effectively teach, and our students cannot actively learn. So we're focused on social emotional health for this year. And for the first time, we have a school social worker at all of our schools. And then we're expanding on programs that we've already had in place, like social justice, our community learning centers, the school health centers, and partners like Mind Peace. So I believe if we come together as a community and continue to be resilient, we can turn this ship around. So again, just thank you for the participation and the inspiration that we can do this together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone on the call. I just want to go back to Commissioner Driehaus. I mean, that story is going to stay with me for the rest of the day. I just want to let you know that. It really is, because you took a step forward. Everyone on this call has taken a courageous step forward in some respect, in some moment of your career, to lend a voice to people who have no voice in this battle. And I thank you all. And that is an example that we all should take away today. And you have the power, everyone on this call, to lend your voice, to take a step forward, to lean in. And we have women helping women here that can give you support so that we can move the needle on this issue. So we have a person, any person. Can you put it in the chat, or Miss Sarah, can you help me here? I'm gonna, someone from everyone has been such an attentive audience. I'd like to take a question from someone in the audience to ask our panel. So let's see here. Do we have a question? I'm gonna ask Devesh.
So we had a question in the chat to talk about the role that mental health plays in this, big picture here, if anybody can speak to that.
And I'm happy to weigh in on that a little bit, if it would, yeah. So one of the things we know, a lot of times people are asking, like, what is the cause of gender-based violence, right? Is it because someone has a mental illness? Is it because someone has alcoholism or drug addiction? And the fact is, like, we're not sure exactly of like where we can identify that, right? Because we know a lot of people who have mental health issues are so prevalent in our region, and they do not abuse other people. We know folks who struggle with alcoholism and addiction, and they do not abuse other people. Now, that said, it can exacerbate issues. And I think that's where we have to tune in this region when we're thinking about COVID impacted a globe. It impacted our region in significant ways last year. And so what we've discovered, with that trauma, it has really impacted gender-based violence. Last year, we had huge spikes of gender-based violence, not only to, folks reaching out to us in our hotline calls. We had nearly 12,000 hotline calls last year. Think about that, 12,000. We had the most domestic violence homicides ever last year. And then we roll into 2021. We're showing up more to the courts. We're showing it more on to the hospitals. We're showing more on scene, and we're seeing more hotline calls. And unfortunately, domestic violence homicides have skyrocketed again. So I feel trauma, mental health, as a pandemic has compromised systems. People aren't getting accesses to resource and support that they need. That it all plays a part in that, and that's why it's really critical. Someone mentioned before, I think it was Moira, like, one agency is not going to solve this issue. Humans are holistic and complex. So that's why our agency absolutely has critical partnership with mental health providers. As well as, addiction centers, as well as other social services, as well as policymakers, funders, schools, because we have to work collaboratively.
Thank you, Kristen. I do want to say that Kristen has some call to action for us today. And I'm going to toss it back over to Ms. Kristen Shrimplin. Before I do, I want again, thank our panel for joining us. And I will have to say, Kristen Shrimplin, Tianay Amat, Barbara Turner, Moira Weir, Denise Driehaus. It is a privilege to stand among you this morning to talk about this critical issue. And I have to tell you, I lived in Cincinnati since 1996. It makes me so proud over and over again to see people, leaders standing up and leading with your heart in this way. It literally brings me to tears sometimes because it never ends. It is overflowing always, and we are grateful for you. So thank you, Ms. Kristen Shrimplin.
That's right. And we're grateful for you, Regina, and thank you to all of our panelists. It takes heart, it takes willingness, it takes mindfulness, and it takes strategic collaboration. And so we heard a lot of great takeaways today. And I think one of the most important takeaways in our session is our region is not powerless. It is fundamentally not powerless. We absolutely can rise beyond violence by each of us making a positive change right now. So no matter what system you may be part of, right? Whether that's the workforce, whether that's education, healthcare, criminal justice, social justice, you're a funding or policy maker, or you're the media, you have the opportunity to utilize your voice and your influence and pull a lever of change. So where do we start? How do we make that concrete? Well, that's the good news. We've got options, right? There are micro levers we can pull and macro levels we can pull right now. Because that what we said at the start was we have a sense of urgency. The pandemic has unleashed an increasing spike in gender-based violence. So let's make it concrete. You can start with the personal lever, and this is real power. This is real power. So when your friend, your coworker, your neighbor, your family member may disclose abuse to you, please tell them it's not your fault. I believe you. There's help available if you would like that. We know from our work and we know from the research that this can change the trajectory of resilience then that survivor can begin in. So if you're looking at, well, what can I do with my professional capital? That's a great question. Get curious. Think about, if you own a business or if you're an employee, what does it look like at your workplace? Ask if there is a policy that supports survivors, meaning, do you get those reasonable accommodations to go to court to get a protection or to go to therapy or to go seek health care? Do employees know that they can connect with an agency like Women Helping Women? And we're going to respond and we'll show up and support survivors in a confidential, free way. Get curious about your workplace. Within professional development, what's in the queue? What's in the pipeline? Is prevention of gender-based violence and its impact on the workplace, is that in the queue? Is that a priority? If not, what can be examined there to make it a priority? Because it impacts recruitment, it impacts retention, it impacts safety, it impacts liability, and it impacts productivity and employee wellness. So Women Helping Women, we run a program there. We would always be happy to show up and partner. So maybe you're part of an education system or you're a parent. Let's get curious and inquire, are students getting equitable and full access to evidence-based teen dating violence and sexual violence prevention curriculum? If not, that's okay. Let's pull the lever together. Women Helping Women will show up. We'll provide that programming at zero cost to the system, zero cost. We just need access. If you're a policymaker and you have influence with legislators, or maybe you're a person who likes to advocate with elected officials, we've got a macro lever for you to pull. We need to advocate for more survivor-centric laws. We need them. I think Barbara Perez, YWCA CEO, put in the chat about Aisha's law that passed yesterday, and that was critical. But there's another law that we really have to concretize around, and that's the fact that in Ohio, we remain the only state where strangulation is a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor. We need to advocate to get that to a felony. Also, you may not know this, Ohio has a law in the books where it is not illegal for a spouse to rape their spouse. So it's time to eliminate the spousal exemptions for crimes like rape and sexual battery. And lastly, and it's easy if you want this immediate step to take, just celebrate. Celebrate with us this month. Women Helping Women turned 48 years old. 48. I'm very excited about that. So if you want to support our work with systems as we advocate for equitable access and change, and we connect with leaders in the community, both formal and informal, feel free to just text to donate. It'll go in the chat. You know, $1 per year that we've been in existence, $48. That's up to you, but we would love for you to celebrate with us. So I just have to say thank you so much for your time and attention. This has been a great 5th annual corporate event. I would like to thank again our generous sponsors, Francie and John Pepper. You are incredible champions for this work, as well as PNC Bank. You made this possible. Thank you to our amazing moderator and panelists. And if any of you wish to stay on the line, you know, in the Zoom, I'm happy to answer any further questions. But this concludes our time together today. Thank you, everyone.